Hi, it's Lauren from Allegro Fitness London. Recently, in a lot of my classes, I've had people come up to me at the end and ask me which teacher training they should take. And it's a pretty hard question to answer because it really depends person to person what you want to get out. But I thought I'd make a little video because I thought perhaps you guys are wondering too. So the first thing I want to kind of bring up and raise if you're thinking about doing a Pilates teacher education is why you're doing it. Is it because you want to deepen your own understanding of Pilates, or is it because you actually feel you want to give something back? In terms of wanting to deepen your own practice, I wouldn't say don't do it necessarily, just be aware that you're probably more likely to get more out of getting private sessions from your favorite teacher over a teacher training education. There's a lot of anatomy, physiology that, if I'm completely honest, is completely outdated. You just have to kind of learn it on these educations to pass the exam and say that you've done it. And a lot of the movements are going to be quite basic because you have to bear in mind, if you've been doing Pilates for years, there is no prerequisite to entry on Pilates education. So you're going to be going over hundreds with people who've never done 100 before. So for some people, I would actually just recommend taking some private classes with your favorite teacher. The other thing I want to flag is if you think that being a Pilates teacher is going to mean you get to do Pilates all day, every day, it really doesn't. So Pilates is so rewarding to be a teacher. But when you're teaching, it's really about your students' practice and not your own. So you still have to attend classes and maintain your own practice, whether it's on your own, other people's classes, online. You have to practice those hours outside of your teaching hours. So if this still sounds appealing to you, then we're going to dive into some different entries and some different kind of ways to go into it. So we'll start off, you've got your three main types of Pilates education. You have got your mat education, you have got your reformer education, or you've got your fully comprehensive education. Now there are some people who do things like chair or Cadillac on its own, but generally speaking, people will enter on one of those routes, and most of us will enter on a mat route. Now the mat route, this is most people's portal to entry. It is your easiest, most attainable one. Not necessarily easiest in respects of, it requires less knowledge or less intelligence, anything like that. Just it is far more accessible, there are far more courses, and in terms of practicing, you can do it at home. And in terms of if this is right for you, we're going to go to that at the end. Now, a lot of mat trainings actually exist online. So if you really want to get teaching and you need a flexible schedule, then I would actually kind of recommend that. To those of you who've been doing Pilates a long time, you don't necessarily have much to gain aside from the network by doing an in-person, which I don't want to cast aside as something not worth having. But in terms of accessibility to sort of get teaching as quickly as possible, your online option might be your best one. It is cheaper, you can do it in your own time, all the information is the same. And since we're not requiring any access to specific equipment, then just be able to start teaching. That is a massive pro of your mat. It doesn't take that long to complete. So some of the online courses I've seen, they take just 3 months part-time. And in that time, you are going to be practicing, you are going to have assessments to do. So you are going to be teaching. To summarize, the pros of your mat education are it's going to be cheaper, far more accessible, both to receive your education online and in terms of getting set up. Once you're qualified, you can start teaching online immediately. You can even host online classes for free to kind of build up your client base. I'm not saying you should, but that is kind of an option for a lot of people. Cons with mat, of course, is that it's a far more saturated market. The more accessible it is, the more people are going to do it. That being said, I wouldn't worry too much about that. You will eventually get the work. There is the work out there, you just have to go looking for it. And then the other con with mat is mat on its own, you're probably only going to find, if you're working for other studios, you're probably only going to find 1, maximum 2 hours of work back to back. So you would kind of want to combine it. So for a hobby, if this is just your side hustle, you just really want to teach because you enjoy it, absolutely fine, stick with it. But then those of you who are looking to make this a career or a proper source of income, I would say you are going to need to get the reformer alongside. But mat can be a nice entry point so that you are earning the money, making the contacts while you do your reformer set. Next up, we have our reformer education. Now, with reformer, it is much more likely you're going to have to do it in person, both to have access to the reformers, not only to learn on, but to practice on. So a lot of educations will offer you practice time. And a lot of reformer educations actually require a certain amount of practice or teaching time. But we'll get onto that as well with the comprehensive. If you are willing to put the work and the time in, with reformer there is a lot more earning potential, not only with studios because they do pay more, but the fact that you're going to find that you get usually about 3 or 4 hours of work back to back. So those of you who are looking to make more of a living off of teaching Pilates, I would definitely recommend going for your reformer. And not only with the classes, but for the one-on-ones, you're more likely to get people coming to you for those one-on-ones because again, there's far fewer people don't have their own reformers and they want that extra time to kind of develop their technique. Obviously, you're going to need a reformer to practice or teach on, so whether you own one yourself or whether you can use one at your studio, that is up to you, especially if you get clients coming to you from that particular studio. If that studio offers one-on-ones, they might want you to do it there. If they don't, they might be okay with you doing it at your own home studio, but always make sure to check. And then finally, we have our comprehensive education. So this is your Cadillac, your barrel, your chair, your reformer and your mat, and then you've also got tower, ball, etc. Now, this one is for those of you who are just really wanting to take it to the maximum level. You can work full-time in Pilates without it. So don't do it if you want to start work. This is for those of you who really, really want to get into the nitty-gritty, you want to practice, you want to have that connection with the studio, because often if you do a comprehensive education, you'll do it through your studio, and a lot of the time they will then offer you work at the end and you'll be sort of more connected to that particular studio. It's not to say it's the case every time, it's just what I've seen. Now with that one, you are going to have access to all the studios, because some studios do require that you have, for example, chair, or that you have tower, or that some even require Cadillac and some even require fully comp. So you're going to have your pick of the studios, so long as you're a good teacher, because if you're a bad teacher, it doesn't matter what education you have, you're not going to do very well. What I will say though is that in the short term, in the entry, you're actually not going to receive more pay per hour at least. In the long term, you might, but it is not because of having the certification, it's just going to be because of experience and access to clients, because you get some clients who do want to do things like Cadillac and chair. I would say if you are more favoured to having private clients and one-on-ones, this is probably one of the only ones where I'd say this is probably the option for you, because in terms of injury rehabilitation, you have your access to all the equipment, and I find specifically things like the chair and the Cadillac can be quite nice for very, very injured people. Whereas the reformer, I think it is also very nice for very injured people. It's just then you've got that choice. Almost sort of off the record, even though it's filming, so it's kind of on the record, is what I have noticed about not all, but a lot of comp people and a lot of comp studios, again, not all, they can be quite elitist. They think that they're the best because they have these certifications, even though I'm of the opinion it's not about the piece of paper, it's about the practice and the work the person puts in. So without having all the education, if you're someone who's been going to Pilates regularly, having one-on-ones, I think you can potentially be a better teacher or Pilates knower or whatever than someone who's done all the education. So there is one more route into the industry that we're going to talk about. It is not a conventional route, however, it is one that I do want to mention because I feel that a lot of people don't mention it or know about this route. Now in the UK, you don't legally need a Pilates certification to teach Pilates. What you do need, through any company, through yourself, is insurance. And the only way you're going to get insurance is by having some kind of proof that you do know what you're talking about. Now, to prove that you know what you're talking about, it does not have to be a Pilates certification. If you've been training a lot of Pilates and taking a lot of one-on-one sessions, that can in fact work as proof. So long as you've got the insurance, you can teach without a certification. So other routes you might want to consider, if you're considering, say for example, sports massage or personal training, if you want to go in down those kind of routes, those will also offer you the ability to insure yourself. Like I said, it's not the conventional way in, but it is one that people don't really know about. There are also CPD, so continual progressional development courses, that are often a lot shorter in Pilates that you have access to through either your PT, your sports massage. If you're a physiotherapist, for example, you can probably take these Pilates CPDs without having to do a full education. Say for example, maybe already have your PT cert or are a physiotherapist or do work in the health and fitness industry, this may be the best route for you. You understand the principles. I can tell you for certain, if you are a physiotherapist or someone working in physical health already, the theoretical side of Pilates is not going to be anything new. In fact, it is incredibly outdated at the moment. The other thing is perhaps those of you who maybe don't feel quite aligned to any Pilates studios or educations in your vicinity. There might actually be a sports massage or a PT education or a yoga education in your vicinity that you feel a lot more aligned with, and then you're not going to have to do both from scratch. So you can do the yoga education and then do your Pilates CPD on top, for example, later on. Those of you who are maybe fitness enthusiasts who want to, say for example, add on Pilates to your roster because you know it's good for you, feel it's good for you, and you kind of want to get a deeper understanding and offer it to your clients, say if you live a little bit further out, then that's also going to be a nice option for you. Now, when choosing, I would say things to consider. Are you looking at working full-time or part-time as an instructor? I will say I don't know any instructors who work 40-hour work weeks. So when we are saying full-time, I mean a full-time income, which in London, it's going to be around 20 to 25 hours a week that you'll be working. So that's your first consideration. If you are looking just to do part-time, you can probably get away with just doing your mat. If you are looking to do full-time, I would say you're going to have to do reformer and maybe a couple of CPDs. And then another consideration is if you want to work for other studios or if you want to work for yourself, and if you want to open a studio. In terms of opening a studio, I would say you should probably teach a little bit first, just so that you can put yourself into the shoes of the instructors and also to know if it's really what you want. But in that case, I would say you probably don't need to have your comp education, but you would probably need your reformer education if you're going to open a reformer studio. If you're planning on open a gym, I would say then it's up to you. Are you going to have a reformer studio or not? I'm going to run your own business. As you know, I only do mat on my business. I'm reformer certified, but I only do mat. Why is that? Because it's portable. Now there's a lot of overhead with the studio costs. So I don't particularly myself feel like I want to own my own studio. I enjoy teaching. I enjoy getting to spend time with my clients. And for me, that means not having to fill up 8 hours a day of classes just to cover the rent of the studio and the teaching hours. And I've seen a lot of studios, they struggle to staff. So it's my personal choice that I want to only operate mat, community classes, and then from there we're going to go on to events. As I said before, are you wanting to do this education because you really want to teach and share your knowledge? Or is it because you want to deepen your own understanding? And neither is the incorrect answer, but as I said, a reformer certification costs thousands, so about £2,000 to £3,000. I personally, if it were me wanting to deepen my own understanding, I would actually just take some private classes with my favorite instructor. You're going to get far more. You're going to get far more that's relevant to you and what you want to understand just by asking questions. And you don't really need the certification, like the piece of paper, for anything. And as I said before, if you can prove you know what you're talking about, then if you were to decide to teach, you can probably get shorter courses like your CPDs. Final consideration we're going to take is pay. Now with pay, I can speak for London that the pay is going to be anywhere between £25 an hour to about 70 if you're working for another studio. Now this is going to depend on experience, it is going to depend on what the studio requires of you, so don't expect to earn £70 an hour straight off the back of doing your reformer education. That being said, if you run your own business and take private clients, you can charge upwards of £90 for a one-on-one session for reformer and even more for comp. It actually depends more on your sales and marketing skills over your Pilates skills, if I'm honest. So if you're doing one-on-ones, you can easily charge upwards of 100 per hour. It is not unreasonable for London to charge that amount, but you need to be able to sell it. So that is that consideration. There's one more portal of entry. Now there are some gyms in London where you can get your training for free as part of the training to work for the company. Now this is actually how I brought myself to London because I needed the employment contract. I actually already had my education, and what I would say is this works really well for some people but not for everyone. So for myself, it was necessary because I needed to move into London. I needed an employment contract, but if I were to go entering Pilates, I would not do it that way myself. This is why I am not mentioning the name. I had a terrible experience at this place. However, I am mentioning it because not everyone has had the same experience as me. So these studios, they give you their training for free. You are then given a full-time employment contract where you work maybe 5 to 6 hours a day. Well, you work 8-hour days, but of that, 5 to 6 of it will be classes and private sessions, so 40-hour work week. I found that this was too much, as it also pays marginally above minimum wage. You do get paid holidays, and they do offer a lot of CPDs within their company. So that is another consideration. So for someone who doesn't have any financial responsibilities, maybe you're still living with your parents, this can be a really nice route to entry. To get the education for free, you get a lot of coaching and experience. So once you're out of this studio, you're going to pretty much be guaranteed work. If you've been taking the feedback and behaving like a professional, you are going to have absolutely no trouble getting work out of the back of that job. Final thing I want to run down is the educations I've seen in London. So I work predominantly in Reformer for other studios, and the main ones I see come up time and time again are Stott, 10 Health and Fitness, and Polestar. Now, these are not the be all and end all, and this might just be my network, but in terms of getting work, I really think that it really depends on you as a person. It does not depend on the education. However, these ones seem to be the most popular in London. Each of these also paints an image to the studio owner of the sort of education and the sort of person or the sort of Pilates that you teach. So your Stott is going to a sort of Pilates traditionalists, not necessarily the elitists, but the traditionalists. They like their core movements, working off the classical repertoire, so to speak. Your 10 education is going to be more dynamic Reformer, so that bridging towards Pilates fitness. It's a more modernized version. It is going off the traditional repertoire. And then your Polestar is sort of somewhere in between. So they're a little bit more modernized version of the Stott ones. Those are the main three I say I've seen. This is your decision. So if none of this advice sits with you, if you've seen an education you like, go for it. It has to feel right for you, because remember, it's not about doing an education to get work if the work you're going to get is not at studios that are aligned with you, your values, your approach towards fitness. I hope this was a helpful video, and if you do have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, or you can follow me on Instagram and just write me a message there. And I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.